What's it like running a business from like a tiny Scottish island compared to maybe somewhere else?
One of my favorite fun facts about the island that I live on is the land mass, the size is actually a similar size to Manhattan. The difference being we have 200 people living here and Manhattan has how many millions. So I always like to laugh at that kind of
Oh my God.
comparison. I mean, what is it like? It's all relative, right? This is the only like I started the business, I started Generalist World on this island, and so I haven't actually known it from any other place. So it's actually just normal. And I would say that starting it from here and building it from here for the past 2.5, coming up to 3 years, has really informed how the business runs. Like it has community at the heart of it, which I've learned everything about community from living in a community of 191 people. It has definitely like a calm element to it. So it's definitely not the Silicon Valley hustle culture of like grow at all costs. It's very much, I try and instill the like values and the way that I live here into the business as well. So yeah, it just is what it is. And I haven't known any different. So it's just kind of like my normal.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Do you think there's any like disadvantages to say like I guess you're not in a tech hub like San Francisco or London, etc. Has everything still been fine for you running a business, or are there any times where you're just like, oh, I wish I could be in like I know SF or Bali right now, where I can
Yeah.
go and talk to like 50 other people in a room, etc.
I have my moments, I have my moments where I see like these big meetups in New York and SF, and I'm like, oh, hot dang, that'd be kind of cool. Where like where I live, people are like, if they introduce me, they're like, this is Milly, and she does something on the computer. Like no one has any idea, no clue what I do, and that's fine. It definitely gives me a little bit of separation. There's definitely times when I am like envious of having that like connection of people like really close by. But like, A, the internet, I open my laptop and I'm like, there's too many people, if anything. Like, I can't wait to close it at the end of the day and just like go back to my peaceful, quiet life. So, if it weren't for the internet, if it weren't for LinkedIn, Twitter, like, I mean, we wouldn't be connecting right now, right? Then sure, it would be really, really quite isolating and quite difficult. But because I have the internet and because I mean, I think it's not that far. People laugh at the extent that I travel to get to like my nearest cities. But for me, I've been doing it for a few years now. So I'm like, yeah, like this time tomorrow, I could be in London. And like, that's not too crazy. I love trains. I just get on the train and I use the train as my office. And so, yeah, I think it's all about your attitude toward it. For me, this like the sacrifices are well worth it. It means that I get to have like a bit of separation from being like all consumed by my business. And I think in the long run, hopefully, my plan is that that helps keep it being like a sustainable business, something that I can sustain and keep running at for like many, many years.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm also a big fan of trains. So, yeah, I've noticed before on Twitter that you've been like, I don't know, here to do my 15-hour journey to London. And everyone's like, what? But why don't you just take a jet and or why don't you take a plane? So,
Literally,
yeah, I
the
love
best
it. It's
example, Pete. I was in SF a
yeah.
couple of years ago, and there was like a really cheap deal. They have this like train system called Amtrak. And there was a really cheap deal and you could get 10 train stops. And I was like, oh, what if I just got the train from San Francisco to New York? And so I did. It took me over a month. And Americans, everyone I met was like, do you know that we have planes? Like there is other modes of transport, but I had the most fun traveling across the
Yeah.
US by train. It was over 4,000 kilometers. It was a hefty journey, but if you're a train nerd like me, it was like a little slice of heaven.
Yeah, I've got a friend who's done that journey in like opposite direction from
Oh, cool.
yeah, New York to San Francisco. So yeah, it's on my bucket list. I really want to do that as well. But yeah, it's funny. I did go through some tweets in preparation for this, and I think someone was saying like, yeah, it's going to blow Americans' minds if you say that you're going to do it. It's like it's not the 1800s. We've got
Yeah, we
planes.
have planes. And I'm
Just like,
like my rebuttal, my argument to that is like you don't actually get to experience anything of the country when you're in the sky. You don't get to see
yeah.
anything, you don't get to go and meet the people, you don't get to eat the food, you don't get to listen to the different accents, like you don't get to be immersed in the place where when you're going overland and you're just in Texas, oh my gosh, Texas went on forever. Like I could not
Mm,
believe how big that state was. I was in it for like a full 24 hours, just you're still in Texas. But you get to experience, like, if I had just looked at Texas on a map, I'd be like, yeah, I suppose it's large. But then you go over it by train and you're like, this place goes forever.
yeah, fair days. So, yeah. Getting back briefly to the island, if you could have like one thing like added to the island, like no expense spared, like a cinema or I don't know, like a yeah, a gym or a co-working space or anything like no money's no object, what would be on your island to like make it
Hmm.
even better?
Well, so we maybe surprisingly have quite a few amenities. So there is a traveling cinema. I don't know if you guys have this down like in the Central Belt. Probably not. Actually, no, I say that out loud.
No.
Like, it's called
We
the
have culture.
you have literal cinemas. It's called the Screen Machine, and it's like a big lorry that drives around with a cinema on it, and it goes across all like the Highlands and Islands. It's a bit of a bummer actually, because recently they upgraded the Screen Machine and they did it too big, so it can't actually fit on our ferry anymore. So we don't have a Screen Machine, but because okay, this is a great example of like community spirit. So the Screen Machine was like, right, we can't get on the ferry anymore. Everyone was devastated. We're like, oh, but like, you know, we're not going to get any access to cinema. So the community started a cinema club. So right now I'm in the community hall, which is where I do a lot of my work from. And once every couple of weeks, we just set up like a big projector. We've got like some kind of who knows what license, and we just host our own cinema. And you go and you figure it out. So we do have a cinema, kind of. The community hall. We also funded a gym. So at the back,
Cool.
we now have a gym, and that's cool. What I This is going to be like a really practical answer, but what I would fund is housing. I wouldn't fund like we actually have everything we need. We keep ourselves pretty well
Yeah.
entertained. We're all really busy. What we
Yeah.
need is better housing. That's what I would fund.
Okay. Fair days. That's a very like noble and selfless answer, but yeah, that's good. That's good. Housing. I think a lot of people need more housing, so that makes sense. Let's get into your business like itself.
Sure.
You run Generalist World. You set up yourself. It's totally bootstrapped. Do you want to tell us like? I think there's a few different products behind it. There's a course, there's a community, there's a newsletter. Do you want to go over like yeah, what is Generalist World?
Yeah. That's a good overview actually. It's a bunch of different things. Mainly we look at them as tools or community. For people who have these non-linear or squiggly career is kind of the cool way of saying it now. Basically people who have this very broad skill set, we help them build better careers. And often those careers look a little bit unconventional. They haven't followed the traditional straight line, and so there's no blueprint for how to navigate that. And so we bring people together. The community was our first and main and is our core kind of product, which has become kind of famous. It's been called a cult quite a few times, I think lovingly.
A
I
cult in a good way.
think it's a joke,
Yeah.
but you know, I guess you never really know for sure. And so yeah, we have the community, which is has around 650 members now from folks all across the globe, and it is just a really wonderful pocket of the internet. It's my favorite place to hang out. We have loads of content. We try and just like pump out as much free, valuable content as we can. So that's everything from LinkedIn to essays to TikToks to we have a podcast, keeps me on my toes. And yeah, very recently we have started to move more into the education space. So we're releasing a course and we're working with universities to kind of turn that course into more like targeted for students as well. And all around this idea that careers are changing, you're not going to do the same career forever. It just isn't how the world works anymore, especially with AI like taking over everything. So
Yeah.
who's preparing you for that? And who teaches you how to like stack your skills and translate your value and tell your story and build that confidence? And we think we're the people to do that.
Awesome. That sounds great. What led you to create Generalist World in the first place then?
I'm a generalist, but
Good start.
I had no language for that. I just thought I was this weirdo all rounder for the last like I guess 8 or 9 years. I've been building companies, either my own or I've been like that kind of first employee, first second employee very very early on in the team. And so I would just naturally always wore all the different hats. And again, I didn't have the language. I would just call myself like an all rounder. I didn't even care about the title. I was like, I don't care. As long as I'm like doing work that lights me up and that excites me, I'm happy. Like I'm good. And it was when I was working my last role, I had a contract role working with a mental health tech company based in Singapore called Bravely. And I was their director of miscellaneous, like Generalist 101. That was my contractor title. And it just got me thinking, like, one, what a weird title. And two, is there anyone else with a weird title like this? And like, what are they calling themselves? How do they talk? Because I had no idea. Like, my CV was like a train wreck. I was like, I don't know how to sell that to like a traditional organization. And so, yeah, it started with a question of like, oh, I heard this word generalist, but I'm pretty sure everyone thinks that's a bad thing. I disagree. I think it's a really good thing. I think it's like a really, really valuable skill set. What happens if I try and bring one other person or two other people or five other people? And then before you know it, you've got a network of over 60,000.
Yeah, that's amazing. What are your thoughts on like the where like the space for both basically?
I think it's essential. I think we absolutely 100% need specialists. Like there are times when I'm like, I would like a specialist working on this with me. And in fact, there's a few examples. So within Generalist World, we ironically have people who on paper are hardcore specialists. Like they've got like their
Mm.
PhD, they are deep in the specialized world, yet they have self-opted into generalist world. And for the first like year I was like, I don't understand what this is all about. And I've come to realize that being a generalist, it is a bit of an identity, but it's also just how you approach the world. So like these deep specialists with their PhDs and their like 10, 15 years of like specialized domain expertise, it's more so about how they approach their career. Maybe they've gone from academia to tech to product to entrepreneurship. They've skipped, they've leapt. They haven't stayed on that one path, and that's actually what makes them really special. When they have all these different intersections and different like lenses to view the world, that's when they can solve really really cool problems. So that's kind of one example, and then the other example is our team. We have a very small team. As you said, we're bootstrapped, so we always have to be very careful about how much money we're spending on everything,
Yeah.
particularly on staff. So we've got a small team of five, and they are all generalists. And that can actually be problematic because obviously we're like, sometimes you got to go deep on things. And so how we get about that, how we get around that is our team of generalists is kind of like the foundation. Between us, we have a wildly broad range of skills that we can almost touch everything. And when we need a specialist, we just hire them. We just like bring
Yeah.
them in for sometimes it is amazing what happens when you bring a specialist in for an hour and you're like, you're a top expert at this. And like we'll pay top money for that. Like if it accelerates us, if it gets us ahead, you know, a month, 2 month, 3 month of us trying to figure it out, I'm so happy to pay for that expertise. But as a like default, we've designed the company to be the foundation is generalists, and then we just kind of tap into specialist expertise as and when we need it.
Awesome. That sounds very smart. I like the fact that you're talking about team a lot because it seems like your approach with like I guess your company and hiring seems very different because basically I'll put anonymous people on blast at the moment, but I think there's a kind of thing in tech where a lot of people are like, I'm a solo founder, I do everything myself.
Mm-hmm.
and they get all the credit in the interviews and stuff. Whereas you're very different, where you have like photos of doing like calls with your team
Mm-hmm.
or doing like in person meetups and stuff. So, can you talk through your approach to that and your approach to hiring and why you're not like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm Millie, I'm a solo founder, I do everything myself and stuff like that?
I think a part of it is just not my nature. I think
Yeah,
I
fair
think
enough.
another part is like my philosophy is the more famous and the more rich I can make everyone around me, that being my team, that being my community, that being my network, the more it's literally the rising tide lifts all boats. So like a kind of boring just to be like, cool, look at me. I'm like at the top of the mountain by myself. Like you're at the top of the mountain by yourself. How much cooler is it to bring other people with me? For literally, it's not even a question in my mind. Like there is no downside to bringing others up with you. In fact, like Generalist World is better because we have a team. No doubt about it. I everyone has a skill set that has a boundary, right? So by bringing in these other people, it is just naturally going to be better. And yeah, so I figure like, and that I think that's why community has worked so well for us and why our community, as it scales, is still thriving and people are still in love with it. We still have our very early members and we're still onboarding people every year. And it's because it's this very genuine place where it's like, yeah, we're rooting for you. What do you need? Can I intro you? What can I do? I'm actually doing a post literally at the moment where I had an idea last week and I was like, it'd be kind of cool if I could use my network to get people like paid speaking gigs. And so I just did a post in Generalist World. I was like, hey guys, who wants to do some paid speaking work? Like, give me your bio, give me the three things you'll talk about, and let me go amplify it for you. I'm just like, I've kind of built this network out of nowhere. I really couldn't care less about the numbers, truly. What the network enables for me is a platform to be like, a network is actually power, is what I am realizing. And so if I can use my network, sure, to keep Generalist World like zero marketing costs, that is a really nice thing to continue. But if I can also use it to like raise the profiles of other people, then I just don't see a world why I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. Where do you find people when you're hiring them? Because I guess the other thing is it doesn't seem like it's like, oh, I'm just getting a bunch of VAs in Southeast Asia. These are people that I guess are, well, you can tell me where they're based, but
Yeah.
it's like it's a different hiring process than I guess a lot of people do.
Yeah, it's been accidental, I guess, accidental slash evolving, just like I've never written a job description. I've never even set out to hire someone. What I do is post every single day on LinkedIn as and Twitter, as maybe Twitter a little bit less, but like LinkedIn for sure. And people see it, they resonate with it. Some people resonate hard with it. And those people who also resonate hard plus have the bias for action will email me and say, hey, so every single person that's come in to Generalist World, I think it, like every single person has started just with like a DM being like, I love what you're doing. I deeply resonate. Here is how I think I can help. And I'm scared to say this because I might get too many DMs, but mostly I don't hire, obviously, everyone that comes through the door. But there are certain, I guess, qualities. One of those qualities being like, do the hard work for me, do the thinking for me. So, for example, Lindsay, I got a DM from her one day. She was like, I hard resonate with everything. You need a podcast. I have 5 years of audio engineer experience. I've had my own podcast. I can get you up and running. And I'm like, sick. So I'm just going to like turn up and we're going to record. And then that has evolved into it started as a podcast and then it grew and grew and grew. And now Lindsay is a partner at GW. So you just never know. Like, I can't emphasize enough the just like shoot your shot method, even down to our illustrator. Our illustrator was listening to a podcast and she was like, I would really love to like draw out the podcast that you're doing. And I was like, cool, like, let me see what that looks like. it was gorgeous. And now she does all of our illustrations. And that's been my hiring. I don't know if that would work for everyone, but I think that the key nugget to take away there is the building in public and building a personal brand, because then people know, like, I think there's only so long you can fake something. So I've now been posting every day for like 3 years, and people know, they get a feel, like they get a feel for you, they trust you, and people want to work with people that they trust.
Yeah, I think as well, I've just kind of worked out in my head because you've not written a job description or done posts or anything, you're automatically hiring people that have a bias for action. It's sort of preemptively weeding out people that don't have a bias for action
Sure.
because you're hiring the people that get in contact with you.
Yeah, and I will add one caveat to that, is that if you are thinking about taking this approach, it's not enough just to be like, oh, cool, someone reach out to me and we're going to do a project together. Like, that project has to lead to revenue. So when I was like, okay, we could do a podcast, I'm like, sure, I can take a risk on, say, Lindsay coming in because I can see a path to that revenue. And we actually ended up getting a sponsor before we even recorded an episode. So it's not just about saying yes to anyone who says they want to work with you, because I strongly believe you got to pay people. Like, you got to pay people from the outset. So you'll run out of money really quickly if you're just saying yes to projects for the crack and for the fun of it. But if there is a path to revenue, if the person really resonates, if they bring an idea that fits within your overall strategy, the podcast is a great one, content is a huge part of our strategy, then start with a trial and be really clear and transparent about that trial. We're going to work together for 3 months. These are the expectations. This is what success looks like. This is what excellence looks like. And there's a great snippet in the Culture Code. I don't know if you've read it, but it's a really
No?
great book, and it's about belonging, and it's about how if people really feel like they belong when they can envision a future together. So if in that trial period you can kind of weave in what that future could look like, that's how, again, the trust has been built from day one, and we have like a really amazing retention rate.
Awesome. That sounds amazing. You're talking a bit about personal branding there. I think I was on Harry Dry's marketing example site and he was talking about like the squiggle emoji, which has got super popular on LinkedIn. Is that something that you created or did you see that or can you even just explain, yeah, how that
Yeah.
came about?
Yeah, it's a great chance to shout out to Nikita, who's on our team. This was completely her idea. At the
Oh, cool.
time, we were noodling over the really, really difficult problem of how to get generalists great jobs, how to get generalists hired. And we realized that one of the challenges on LinkedIn is there's no way to actually spot, like, who is this squiggly career, who has this non-linear, who identifies as this. And we were like, oh, we need kind of like a mascot. And we were like, what's the digital version of a mascot? And we're like, maybe it's an emoji. Maybe it's simply having, like, imagine we could all see this very specific emoji. And then we went back and forth for a few days, like exhausting the emoji library, because obviously then you have to pick one. And then we found the squiggle, which is actually Cyclone. And it's kind of one that isn't super used. Like, you wouldn't want to use, the rocket ship.
Yeah.
You'd want to use something that's kind of a little underused. And we just put it out. And our whole business is just built on experiments. Like, we were like, oh, okay, if you're a generalist, add this to your bio. And the beauty is we always start with community. So instantly we have 100, 200, 300 people with their squiggle in their bio, and it grew from there. We did a couple of posts. In fact, it's a good reminder to me, we should do more. We should do that regularly to make sure that people know about it. But it's hilarious and wonderful. When I scroll through LinkedIn, I just see these squiggles everywhere. And the Harry Dry thing is actually really funny as well, because that's a great example of me just being persistent. Like, persistently annoying. I love marketing examples. I think it's brilliant. I think Harry is just like such a genius. So good at what he does. If listeners haven't checked it out, you should go to marketingexamples.com. And I just got hell bent on getting Generalist World a marketing example. And I think for a year, I would DM Harry and I'd be like, Harry, this is it. Like, this is a marketing example. And he'd be like, oh, who is this chick? And eventually I was like, Harry, seriously, the squiggle, this is it. And yeah, we went back and forth and now we're friends. And he ended up doing a masterclass with our community as well. So yeah, persistence pays off. Sorry, Harry, if your DMs blow up because of me saying this.
No, that's amazing. That's really cool. Yeah, Harry's an awesome guy. But yeah, I think like persistence is obviously a really important trait for a founder and something that you seem to have in spades. So yeah, I mean, it definitely pays off to be persistent. I've got like a quote from you from the past because I was like digging through tweets as one does. It's nothing terrible, don't worry. But it's you've got a post from ages ago that was sell first, build second. Before I knew what Generalist World was, I was selling memberships for $99 a year. Then I raised prices. Before I delivered a single workshop, I sold them for $800 an hour. Can you talk us through the kind of sell first, build second mantra?
Yeah, it kind of is does what it says on the tin. It's where before
Yeah.
spending weeks and thousands, or weeks or months, in fact, thousands and all your energy, it's being like, okay, what I realized is I used to think that ideas were like worth it's like the $1 million idea, right? No, ideas are literally worth nothing unless you can execute them and unless people want to actually pay for them. And I realized through my years of building companies, there's a big difference. I think the YC thing is like make something people want, but that's also not enough. It's like make something people want to pay for. Otherwise, you're just going to burn yourself out on this hamster wheel. And so the community example, that was probably my most extreme one where I didn't even have a definition for a generalist. I'd never built a community. And I was just kind of like, oh, I'm going to build this community. I'm just $100 if you believe in it. Like, if you think this could be a thing, come along for the ride. And yeah, we ended up getting over 100 people. That was part of
Wow.
that first cohort. And for me, that's just a signal, right? They're like, they believe that there is something here and they are excited enough about it to get out their credit card. And like $100, it's not $5. It's like it's significant enough. And it's the like you reward your early adopters. All of those people are grandfathered in at $100 a year, which is wild, the value that they get. Sometimes I'm like, but it wouldn't exist. Generalist World would not exist without those first 100 people taking that bet. And the workshop example was the same kind of thing. We had an inbound from a university who wanted us to run a workshop. And so instead of like going and creating the workshop, I just created like 5 workshops to choose from. And when I say that, I mean like a title, like 5 titles to choose from. And I was like, pick one. They chose one, paid, and then we created the workshop. So it's like before you do the work, get the money in the bank. And I will say that doesn't work 100% of the time, but it is amazing how far you can get when you just try, when you just ask and try and see if people will pay for something. It can save you a lot of headache and a lot of money.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. I think the opposite of that is build first and then sell second, which
Mm-hmm.
frequently doesn't work because you build something and then you find out people don't want it, and then you've already spent I don't know 6 months or however many months building something. So
Yeah,
yeah,
like a further point to that is a lesson. Some lessons you just got to learn again and again. It's how much time you spend building versus how much time you spent on distribution. So like
mm,
I love writing. It's like my jam, and I could spend like weeks on an essay, and then once it's published for me, that's kind of the fun bit. I'm like, oh, okay. But then the distribution, if I spent even half as much time on pushing that out, on recreating shorts, on like taking snippets and basically recycling the content, I know it would do so much better. So there's a bit about distribution there as well. It's like, yeah.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Can you go over like how the pricing is now and how it's changed? I think you used to have freemium pricing, but
Hmm.
like yeah, maybe you don't have that anymore. So
Yeah, that
yeah.
was very early days. It's gone through many iterations. The original thesis was this freemium model, and the reason that kind of fell on its face is that so many people wanted the free version, and you can't create a wonderful community. Well, maybe you can, but I never figured out how to do it. You can't create the quality of the community space that I wanted to create when it's just a free for all and anyone can come in and they've got no skin in the game. So I think it was probably about 4 or 5 months after starting GW that we made the decision to go, actually, this is going to be a paid community, which was, I remember at the time, really scary, thinking like, oh, ooh, got to go backwards on the free thing. But thank goodness, like it was a really, really good decision. And so we started at that $99 a year. Our latest cohort was at $950 a year. So we have 10x those prices as we've 10x the value at least. And yeah, so that's our community pricing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I'm in a bunch of communities, and I've had to say like it's maybe semi controversial, but I think the best ones are paid
Yeah.
because it immediately weeds out the people that are like, upvote me on Product Hunt, or does anyone need a developer, or blah
Yeah.
blah blah, or
Exactly.
so yeah, it's maybe something people don't want to hear, but it's like, I don't know. But I think it's weird. I talk about this with my girlfriend quite a lot. The expectation that people have for the internet that everything should be free,
Mhm. Mhm.
whereas you don't have that in like in person businesses. Like
Mhm.
no one goes into a restaurant and says, "Yeah, but I can at least get an appetizer for free," right? That's I just thought of that example, but it's a good one. Whereas, like, yeah, everyone kind of wants something for free online. So, yeah, did you have much like trouble with that, or was did you just draw a line and say, "Sorry, folks,
Drew a
that's how it
line,
is"?
drew a line,
Yep.
set a boundary, and I felt good about the decision because we have so much free stuff. Like the amount of free, valuable content that we pump out is probably too much. Like it is a bit outrageous. So I felt like it would be different if everything went behind a paywall and there's a little bit then of like an ethical, like, oh, you gatekeeping that information, where so much of the free stuff is just freely, readily available for anyone to access. And then the community becomes a space for people who really want to be there. And now to the point where we've done a few iterations. The first one was going from freemium to paid. And then for about a year or so, we had the doors open all the time. You could access a community whenever. We were finding that it was affecting the community experience in the sense that it was like hard to keep track of like who was new. So we decided to move to a cohort model. So now we welcome about 75 people is the number we've landed on. We're experimenting all the time with like a little more, a little less, but about 75 new members each cohort. And we open that now about 3 times a year. Again, we're experimenting with that, just trying to find that optimal level. We have very, very low churn. So as we grow, we have to, it's this like really delicate balance of like keeping it feeling like a tight knit space, but with more people coming in. And we are hosted on Slack, which is like, it's just not built for communities. So that's the added challenge. So it's just like where we'd rather turn people away and keep the community experience really tight knit and really, really high quality. But yeah, it's a challenge and we definitely don't have it
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah, no one does, Millie. Communities are hard, so well
They're
done.
so
I mean,
hard.
yeah, I had one. I mean, not to go into my own journey too much, but I had one before, and I think, especially what I think a lot of developers don't appreciate it, is it's nothing like a software where
Mm-hmm.
you can make a SaaS and okay, people are going to have different, like maybe let's say you've got a video recording SaaS and people are going to have slightly different requirements, and oh, some people might want it to do this and that, but more or less you know what you're getting with that thing.
Yeah.
Communities are totally different, where
Yeah.
some people are like, oh, I want it to be really like, this community is far too like buzzy and there's too much going on,
Yeah.
or it's too quiet. I've got a friend who like I won't say who they are, but they've got a community, and they've had people quit around the same time, and one person said it's too busy, and another person said it's dead. Like, how can these two things be the same? So yeah, communities,
Expectations.
yeah, and it's they do require a lot of management. It's not like yeah,
Ooh, and on that
yeah,
point, I'm going to plug Edja, she was my first hire, and she runs all of our community ops and events. And if anyone is looking for someone who is an absolute wizard at community, Edja, you can't steal her fully, but you can get her for hire for fractional projects. She has been like my right hand gal, keeping Generalist World alive, keeping us growing. I couldn't have done it without her. So if anyone's looking for a community person, Etcher is your gal.
awesome. Yeah, that's great. I'll put a link in the show notes if
Yeah.
that's possible. But yeah, that's sick. Do you think like you'll ever? You're mentioning there that it's on Slack. I mean, I guess. Do you want to go over the pros and cons of like being a community on Slack?
Yeah, I mean, the short version is we're a community of professionals. So people are using Slack every day anyway. And sure, if we were to go to a different platform like Circle, or I mean, there's so many now, I can't even keep up. School, there's like so many. It's then creating a new behavior. And I'm not really out to create a new behavior. I'm just out to bring people together. And the easiest, most efficient way of doing that is Slack. I would say the biggest con for us is we're on the free plan because the paid plan is like wildly expensive, like $7 a user a month or something. So that's just not feasible for us to be on with hundreds and hundreds of members. So the biggest drawback is the that Slack like deletes your data after 3 months, but there are ways around that. We use a platform called Waves, which it's not like perfect either. I would rather it integrated a little bit more into Slack, but our content and our data doesn't get lost at least. So we have years of data of conversations and resources. Yeah, so I think like it just depends where your people are hanging out. Like I know that a lot of the web3 people are all on Discord. That gives me anxiety. I look at Discord, I'm like, absolutely not. It's too stressful. And then I'm on one community on school, which I know like Alex Hormozy is really pushing. So I expect to see a few more communities on there. But if someone is a community builder, I would first ask the question, where are people naturally hanging out anyway? So much easier to get them to go back to where they already are rather than forming a new habit.
Yeah, that's it's interesting that you say that because yeah, I totally agree. Like it's kind of like yeah, I think like for people in our space, in the kind of founder space, I think there's like Slack or Telegram or Discord. I had a
Mm-hmm.
group on Telegram because a lot of my users were already there. But if you're like, hey, I want you to check out this, shiny new thing, and you
Mm-hmm.
have to go there every time,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, people are already on Slack, so
Yeah.
it makes total sense to be there. But that's good about that tool that finds like the yeah finds the old data. I didn't know about that, so
Yeah. It's called
that's useful.
meetwaves.com.
Lovely, awesome. Yeah, I've actually had important messages go missing before,
Yeah.
and I've been like, had to message people. So that's good. See, with Generalist World, do you think you've got like a first mover advantage? Because like
Mm.
I don't. Maybe there's other ones, but I don't know of any other like generalist group.
Yeah, we definitely do have a first mover advantage. I would say when I started this thing 2.5, 3 years ago, it wasn't cool. Like it was not cool to be flying this flag. It was many months, if not into the years, of people being like, what is she talking about? Like, do they not know it's just a jack of all trades? And I'm just like blue in the face, being like, no, I disagree. I think there's value. And like, that's hard, man, to keep that momentum up when everyone else, it's the whole zigging when others zag. And so it was many years of just like accepting that I was going against the grain, and that was absolutely fine. And in fact, it helped me. The people that it did resonate with resonated with it like times 100 because they'd never heard it before. It was like the saying I always get is like it's like light bulbs go off in people's minds. They're like, oh my gosh, like this is me. Whereas now there is, I don't want to say so many, but like even in the last year or two, there's been a bunch of companies who I'm all really good pals with who A have like generalist in the name. So there's like Generalist Co. who does more like recruitment. There's Hello Generalist who matches fractional talent to startups. And now, like, I'm definitely in a little bit of a bubble. I am aware of that, but I am seeing articles, essays, like in like proper, Forbes and like actual publications talking about this generalist movement. And I feel like all that work of shouting when no one cared is starting to pay off because we are like, I mean, every single day we all get tagged in 10, 20. Anytime someone mentions the word generalist, they're like, oh, you should speak to Generalist World. Like we've kind of become associated with that name. And yeah, like it's taking off. There's definitely more. I think the beauty of being the first mover is you kind of get to define how you what kind of culture you make. Do you want to do a competitive culture in this category or do you want to do a collaborative one? And as you can probably tell, I'm like rising tide, man. Let's get like we need all the flags flying. So I'm pro everyone succeeding. There's plenty of space, there's plenty of generalists to go round. And the more people, my biggest challenge over the past few years has been market education and like shouting this message as loud as I can, as wide as I can. So the more people I have doing that with me, alongside me, I'm for it.
Yeah, that's very cool. I mean, I've definitely seen other people do that. A few years ago, there's someone I knew that was quite keen on people getting into their space as well, because it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, then it's going to be more people talking up my niche
Yep.
idea, and it's not going to seem like it's such a crazy idea
Yeah.
if more and more people do it.
Oh,
So, and I guess as well, like for me, like I'm a ghostwriter, and it's not like it's not like I can write for everyone on the internet.
yeah.
So I'm not really bothered about like following or meeting other people doing the same thing as me, because it's like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, I can't. It's not like a winner takes all market.
Exactly. There is so much space. There is so much room to grow. And yeah, particularly if you're in like an underserved or overlooked market like we are with generalists, where there is a lot of the re-education to be done, then every voice helps. So yeah, I'm for it.
Awesome. I've just got a couple more questions, but one of them is about marketing. Like, what's been the best channels for you so far, do you think?
Good question. Recently, one of the things that I've seen easily the most like uptaken is we created a quiz. One of the biggest things people would ask, they're like, I don't know if I'm a generalist. Like, I think I am, but like, how do I know? And then if I am a generalist, what kind of generalist am I? So people wanted a little bit more digging in. And so I did what I always do. And I went to our community and I was like, hey, I want to develop this quiz. And someone in our community, his name's Romero, and he's an organizational psychologist who's really interested in like people and particularly people in like organizations. And so I hired him to create the quiz. And we've been live for maybe 6 weeks. And I think it's brought in about 2,600 or 2,700 leads. I was looking at it this morning. And that's just like it operates on Score App, which is a software by Daniel Priestley. So a quiz has been really, really big for us. Build in public has been really, really big. So just posting the ups and downs, all the realities of what it's like to build Generalist World. And then I would say events have been our other big one. Last month, in September, we hosted, kind of started as a joke, but it ended up going ahead. The first International Generalist Day, which yeah, it started as like a
Oh,
kind
cool.
of kind of a joke in Generalist World. We're like, oh, we need a day, and then it started with one meetup, and then a bunch of people wanted to run meetups, and then before we knew it, we had over 1,000 people meeting up in real life in 30 different cities around the world. It was really wild. We had like a panel with like LinkedIn, and it grew arms and legs. It was really really quite
Yeah.
amazing. And so when you do things like that, the network effects of having an international generalist day, being in 30 different cities, having the hype on LinkedIn, it just like really spread. And then I think the one I'm still not sure about, but I'm going to keep going at it, is TikTok. TikTok for me is like a weird game of chess with like an
Is
algorithm.
is an old chess weird? How is it? Is it like 4D chess or something?
Yeah, it's just a game. It's a total game where I think like with LinkedIn like and Twitter, it's so hard to like grow on there these days. That's just grinding. You just got to be consistent. I don't think I've ever gone viral on like either of them. But TikTok is like you post enough and you figure out these little things like video length, and like you get really good at like figuring out the hook, which has actually made me a better writer for LinkedIn as well. Yeah, so and TikTok, I think we've got like 25,000 followers or something on there, which still unsure of like the quality of those subscribers versus like
Mm.
ones that might come from LinkedIn. But for like reach and actually just for like instant feedback on things, if I've got an idea, I'll just make it takes me now under 5 minutes to make a TikTok, and you get instant feedback. Either the algorithm loves it or it doesn't. And usually if it loves it, I can then turn that into a LinkedIn post.
Cool. Do you for TikTok? Are you doing like personal stuff, like island life and things, or is it more like focused on generalist?
Yeah, no one even knows I live on the island on TikTok. It's I think maybe at the beginning I did a couple of TikToks about it, but well, honestly, then I started getting followers and I was like, "Oh god, I don't want people to like know where I live."
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's
yeah,
fair enough.
and like I'm in the year like 2025 for me. I want to be stepping into the shadows. And I know that sounds weird, but I want to be like pulling back a little bit and pushing other people forward, like this whole strategy of like amplifying others. And I don't want it to be the Milly show. I don't want Generalist World
Yeah,
community to be me at the forefront. Like even in the past year, I've very intentionally been like stepping back and having other people step up, because I just, I love my little quiet life. I spend my weekend fermenting the food that I'm growing. I go on walks and camping. Like I go listen to the birds. I'm like, that's the life. I don't want to be recognized, or, there's a balance
mhm.
of fame. And so yeah, I'm really intentional about what that looks like. And I want other people to have it instead of me.
How do you see generalist world going in the kind of like with AI? Like, I think you've posted that, lots of, I think I saw something on LinkedIn, whereas, in the past, like, I think WhatsApp was, or Instagram was acquired when they had 13
Mm-hmm.
people.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think we're going to see these like really small teams take on the big guys? Is that going to happen, do you think?
Yes.
Cool.
100% yes. It is so inevitable that it's funny. Like we're seeing it, right? Like this is going to trigger anyone that's just been laid off, but layoffs, like companies are realizing, maybe we don't need 1,000 people. Maybe we could do it with 100. And it's like as companies figure out how to use AI. I mean, we're doing it. Literally, we're doing it. I'm bringing in an automations consultant tomorrow to be like, let's automate the heck out of things. Like anything that's a repetitive. We have a list of things that we repeat, and I'm like, I want all of them automated. I don't want anyone doing repetitive tasks. And if we're doing that on a tiny scale, imagine what that looks like at corporate. I think there's going to be an enormous shift from these giant teams to where people either work on smaller teams, small, lean teams, or they have this more like portfolio career approach where they might have a few different income streams. They might be a ghostwriter, they might do some consulting, they might have their own business selling something. And I think the post I did was like, it's going to be the revenge of the little guy. And it used to be that if you supported a small business, it was like kind of like a charity. Like you're like, it's probably going to be like slow and maybe not as good service. But I think that's completely changing. Like now, small doesn't mean sacrificing quality at all. We have so, even if you can't code, like the amount of like The amount of no code tools that you can just spin up products and updates. Yeah, I don't know if you saw that demo that Damesh, the CEO of HubSpot, posted the other day, but it was of that AI using software. And it was the moment for me that the penny dropped, that I was like, ah, oh, this is going to change faster. Like, I thought that this, like, literally, they were like, you could be like, create a 90s style retro website on Webflow. And then you take your hands off the keyboard and your AI goes into Webflow, starts designing, it can use your software like a human. And I was
Wow.
like, this is going to change. Like, I know we've all been saying it, but truly, this is going to change everything. I think faster than we thought, like now, next year, kind of thing. So, yes, I think companies are going to be way more lean and rely way more on AI.
Okay. Well, I was actually in holiday in the Highlands last week,
Uh huh.
so I missed that. So I'll I'll watch that
Check it
video.
out. Damesh posted it. I was
Yeah.
like, whoa.
Yeah, I guess that's interesting because I kind of thought until now that people, no code people might have an advantage or a certain safety because it's like, well, I can go into ChatGPT and it can spit out a bunch of code for me, but it can't spit out like Webflow for me, for
Mm,
instance. But
mm-hmm.
turns
Now it
out I was
can.
wrong.
Now it
Yeah.
can use
Okay.
software.
Yeah. I'll check that out. Where can we find out more about like your journey and Generalist World and everything?
So LinkedIn is probably where I'm most active. TikTok is where I'm running the most experiments. So if you're on there, come and say hi and say you found me through this podcast. It'd be interesting to see how many listeners like kind of cross over. But yeah, everything that you need is at generalist.world. You can find all the links from there. And I'm Milly Tamati. I think I'm the only one. So that's nice and easy on LinkedIn.
Awesome. All right. Thanks a lot, Millie. Thanks for your
Cheers,
chat.
Pete.